to this scene. There is your product, and so many others. There are also so many factors which can make consumers choose one product instead of yours. The price, the ingredients, their personal taste, social norms, and how much they rely on one brand, among others. In the past few years, consumers are adding one more factor to this list: the sustainability attributes of products. Making sustainable consumption choices is an effective way to protect the planet, prevent climate change, and think collectively. Products with sustainable attributes can really attract the attention of consumers and help them make a positive impact. But only if these attributes are properly communicated. Follow these 5 steps to effectively communicate how sustainable your product is. You can use the product packaging and even explore other tools, like your company website and social media. Be reliable. Communicate only the sustainability attributes that are consistent and accurate, and that reflect the concrete evidence you have. Better than using your own voice to announce them, have a label or a certification attesting an accepted methodology when it is possible. Make it relevant. Highlight what really makes a difference in terms of sustainability in your product category. Instead of saying your deodorant is CFC-free, which is required by law, show that it goes beyond legal compliance by not being tested on animals. Be clear. Provide information in a direct and useful way. Don't focus on the brand's characteristics, but on the product's characteristics, and help consumers to improve their behavior, showing, for example, how they can properly discard the product packaging at the end of its life. Be transparent. Satisfy consumers' appetite for information. Instead of hiding relevant data, make it clear how the highlighted attribute was assured and who provided the evidence. For example, if your product is certified on the basis of social, environmental, and economic fair trade standards, show its label and provide further information on your website. Make it accessible. Don't be shy. Consumers have to notice your information. Instead of hiding it or putting it small, make it visible with appropriate font size and graphic elements, and complement with easy-to-use online information platform for consumers to better understand the positive impact of your product. These are the 5 fundamental principles to properly provide the sustainability information, the ones you should start with. But you can go further. Meet the 5 aspirational principles to communicate how sustainable your product is. Show the 3 dimensions of sustainability. Inform improvements of your product related to environmental, social, and economic dimensions. Ideally, use or combine labels that cover these 3 aspects. Invite consumers to act. Use information to engage and encourage consumers to actively adopt positive consumption behavior while buying, using, or discarding your products. Use social media, create campaigns, and build a long-term relationship with them. Be where consumers are. Use a combination of different approaches and diversify your channels. Raise consumers' attention through innovative messages. Put them on your website, social media, and marketing campaigns. And of course, you can always have a label attached to your product. Work with others. Involve different stakeholders. Make partnerships to strengthen your sustainability efforts. This will improve your ability to properly communicate and increase credibility for the sustainability aspect of your product. Let consumers compare products. Help consumers choose between similar items using comparisons of products' characteristics. It's important to use an inclusive and an approved methodology which allows objective comparison. These 10 principles can be applied to all kinds of products and different types of communication. Supplying product sustainability information is a daily challenge, but it's an important way to attract the attention of consumers to the importance of making more sustainable choices. The principles are derived from the Guidelines for Providing Product Sustainability Information, a global guidance on making effective environmental, social, and economic claims to facilitate the empowerment of consumers by enabling better consumption choices. The publication is an output of the Consumer Information Program of the One Planet Network, developed by the United Nations Environment Program and the International Trade Center. It's available on the Product Sustainability Information Hub.
Ready to go. A very warm welcome to everyone around the world. I understand there are more than 700 registrations and counting, so thrilled to have you with us. My name's Helena Laurent. I'm the Director General of Consumers International. I'm only with you for a short time just to open and welcome and give some scene setting. You've just seen a video covering the guidelines for product sustainability information. I hope it's given you just a snapshot of how important and how quite complex that is and how we need to be working together on this topic. During the course of this week, we are thrilled to be joining the United Nations Environment Programme in a conference which I think is the first of its kind. We are focusing in on consumer information for sustainable consumption and production. We'll be digging into that and we'll be asking ourselves and working out how we turn information, good information, into action. We know how important that is. As a consumer advocate, Consumers International has 200 organizations in 100 countries around the world. We work together and called at the Conference of Parties last year in Glasgow for a fast, fair, and accountable transition to a model and marketplace that shows sustainable consumption and production. In order to do that, that's easier said than done. To do that, you need awareness, you need affordability, you need acceptability, and you need accessibility. We'll be talking about just one piece of that during the course of this week, awareness. And let's face it, we know we need more information about our consumption patterns, about how our consumption patterns influence the state of the planet. We need the right type of information. We need the right topics covered. We need it to be simple and clear. We need it to be effective so that it drives changes in behavior. All of those things and more will get discussed over the course of this week. I'm thrilled to be able to, in this first opening session, bring together a whole range of different experts. First, we're going to be hearing from leaders at the United Nations Environment Programme themselves, and also my co-lead on the Consumer Information Programme from the government of Germany. We'll be hearing about consumer attitudes, how those are changing around the world, what consumers are looking for. We'll be hearing from policymakers, how they're approaching this question. We'll be hearing from around the world, really making sure that we have a global conversation here. And we'll be hearing from businesses who are putting the principles into action. So a really multi-stakeholder conversation, which we hope to ensure is the case throughout the week. We're also going to, in this session, and I think in other sessions through the week, give you the opportunity to ask questions. My understanding is that on your system, one, please note you have the option to translate into multiple languages, and there is a chat function. We'll be checking that, and either we'll be reading those out or finding a way to make sure that any questions and comments are fed to the audience to make this a real exchange. So I hope we're all ready and really excited to be digging into this question and thinking about how we make progress and lead action. In the first instance, I would love to turn to Elisa. Elisa Tonda is the head of the Markets Division at the United Nations Environmental Programme. Tell us a little bit about why is it so important to bring stakeholders together? Why is this topic so important, and what is the United Nations Environment Programme doing on this front? Over to you.
Thank you very much, Helena, and let me add my voice to welcome everybody who in the room here or online is joining us today for what you rightly presented, Helena, as the first ever gathering on this subject. And prior to moving into responding to your question, Helena, I actually want to express deep appreciation to all of those who made this conference, this first ever conference, a reality and a possibility. And I'll start expressing our deepest gratitude to the government of Germany, through the Federal Ministry for the Environment, Nature Conservation, Nuclear Safety and Consumer Protection, and particularly to the person of Ulf Jackel, to having been supporting this agenda, supporting the program, the Consumer Information Program that he's behind this conference, and for having supported a lot of the activities and experiences that we will be sharing in the context of this week of interactions. And allow me also to thank the broad One Planet Network community. And I have here at my side Jorge Laguna Celis, who is the head of the Secretariat of the community, but also all those partners in the Consumer Information Program that have been so instrumental in making these next days, the exciting days and informative and insightful days that you will surely experience. And let me just mention a few of those institutions that have really been going beyond the call of duty in making this conference happen. The Global Eco-Labeling Network, GEN, WWF, the Akatu Institute, Adelphi, Eco Institute, and Elena, yourself and your team at Consumers International have really been fantastic in making this conference come together and happen. And Helena, you asked me why it's so important what is happening today for the UN Environment Program for our agenda. And somehow I'm just looking out and thinking of what we went through in the past month. We have yet again been living here with a very evident intensification of the climate crisis. Helena, you alluded to Glasgow bringing together decision makers on these agendas. So wildfire consuming forests and communities, floods sweeping away cities, and cities transformed into lake because of those floods, droughts experienced throughout the world. And they are just becoming more and more intense on a year-by-year basis. And it's actually what scientists have told us. And the experts of the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change have repeated to us so many times that if we don't change our trajectory, they will become more and more intense and more frequent. And that's not the only challenge we're confronted with. Just to nurture ourselves in the way in which we feed, we clothe ourselves, we house ourselves, we are actually entered very powerfully in the spaces of nature and wildlife. And we have put ourselves in a situation where we are actually threatening ourselves with the nature and biodiversity crisis. Not only coupled with that, we do continue to poison our air, our land, our water with toxic gases, with plastics, with pesticides, with waste of all kinds. And this is causing a crisis of pollution and waste. And it's very clear that we're not talking about three separate problems. We're talking about one problem in which each of these elements is influencing and escalating the other. And there's one underlying driver of all of that, and it's our unsustainable way of producing and consuming. So what I'm very much looking forward to the conversation of this week is really to, first of all, bring to the knowledge of everybody how sustainable and consumption and production looks like, and particularly what is the role that consumer information plays into transforming our economy, our society into one that consumes and produces sustainably, with the very special role that consumer information has as being really the connector between the production world and the consumption world. So, Helena, I'm really thrilled to discover all of the experiences that will be unveiled in the course of the next days.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Elisa. Now, you introduced Jorge. Jorge is, of course, our boss because he covers the entire network. Jorge, you joined earlier this year, I think, or even at the end of, no, earlier this year, and you've already been driving us and sort of thinking about the ambition and the future of the program of the One Planet Network. Tell us a little bit sort of what your aspirations and goals are for the network, and within that, why is consumer information so important?
Thank you very much, Elena and colleagues. We are absolutely delighted to be here today. This is not only a wonderful opportunity to see the One Planet Network bringing its qualities, its assets, and its strength together. One, because in the course of this week, we will be hearing from different programs, angles, and perspectives. Two, because we are driving also a digital revolution that is allowing us to address you directly, tap into the possibilities of reducing carbon emissions, but also bringing actors that may otherwise not be able to be here with us today. You have asked a very pertinent question, and that is, what is the relevance of the Consumer Information Program in the context of the new Sustainable Consumption and Production Agenda? Elisa has painted a very clear picture by which the triple planetary crisis we're currently facing is driven by the patterns of sustainable consumption and production. But there's also opportunities. There's also a number of tools and assets that have been developed that we need to put to use. I have been privileged to see the great work and heritage that the Consumer Information Program has developed in the last number of years. These are helping companies, as a matter of fact, streamline their marketing efforts, streamline the way they communicate with consumers, are helping local authorities also and regulators at the national level guide the way we provide consumer information. And third, are helping people make reasonable choices. And let me stop for a second here by what do we mean by reasonable choices and why is it relevant for the work that we are going to be undertaking today. The latest assessments show that we are, as a matter of fact, in a double, I would say, critical situation. Number one, speaking from Europe and also around the world, we are seeing that the current context is reducing our ability to access energy. Our ability to access and affordable energy markets are also hampering our ability to produce goods in a sustainable manner, in an efficient manner, but are also hampering our global efforts to advance on the Sustainable Development Goals and therefore reinforcing the sense of global solidarity. This conference comes at a very critical and topical juncture. And this juncture, it is, as many leaders and decision makers have called for it, an opportunity to evaluate and re-evaluate what we understand by sustainable consumption. And I would like here to take a step back and think that by providing adequate information to consumers, we may achieve, and this is my invitation to all of you today, two goals: that we consume better, but that we consume less. And what do we mean by that? Sometimes in a period of affluence and abundance, we are all led to believe that what I like to call the trap of resource efficiency, that by marketing, advertising green products that are resource efficient, that have perhaps a lower carbon footprint, we can be encouraging a conspicuous approach towards consumption, right? The current crisis that we are facing from a climatic, economic, market, social perspective allows us an opportunity to look at two components. One, the economic factors and the information we are providing to consumers, the way we understand ourselves in a consumption society by promoting more sustainable patterns of consumption and greater understanding of sustainable lifestyles. I am also privileged that we are having the opportunity to look at and hear stories from the North and from the South, because the approach that consumers have in these different perspectives are completely different, right? And this is, once again, another value of the One Planet Network, bringing that universal component. In a nutshell, what we expect of this week is to hear inspiring stories from companies that have managed to adjust in this period of crisis, that are providing better products to consumers that are lasting longer. We want to hear stories from governments on how have they promoted policies that help us advance on a circular economy. And overall, we also want to hear from the perspective of high impact sectors, whether we are hearing from the Sustainable Food Systems Program, how are we benefiting at the end all the actors that are active across all the value chains, leaving no one behind and ensuring that we always keep in mind, number one, the producers that are creating these goods, and also the consumers that are also benefiting from this in a spirit of equality, in a spirit of fair consumption space. So this may sound a little bit philosophical, but I do believe that it is opportune to look at the broader context and look how does this translate then again to the work that we are doing here. Just one last word. The Consumer Information Program of the 10-year framework of programs on sustainable consumption and production, it is the only, I would say, space unique in its character, in the sense that it brings governments, experts, advocates, increasingly businesses. There's no other platform like this. And therefore, I believe that this conference will help us strengthen the relevance of the Consumer Information Program, particularly as we reach to meet the Sustainable Development Goals, specifically SDG 12, that calls for consumers worldwide to have adequate information to guide their choices, but also in the context that perhaps not all of those that are listening to us today are aware, providing also a new blueprint for the new biodiversity framework that will be agreed at the end of the year, in which we're discussing very concrete targets on how consumption can affect our natural environment, and therefore the role that we all have and that we all do. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. So we've heard, Ulf, I'm coming to you next. We've heard from Elisa and from Jorge the context and the importance of this issue from the UNEP perspective. You are head of division at the European and International Policies on Adaptation to Climate Change now. Congratulations on the new role. But you have been in this leadership role of the Consumer Information Programme for some time now. Give us, from your perspective, what you hope to see over the course of the week. What are we going to focus in on, and how do we answer the expectations we've just heard from Elisa and Jorge?
Yeah, thank you very much, Helena. And let me start by thanking UNEP and my dear colleague Helena for the support and the excellent cooperation during the years. The program exists since 2013. So, from the beginning, we saw a great potential in this program, and credibility of consumer information, as well as providing tools for consumers, but also for business to have credible consumer information out there is very important. Consumers are often left alone in this jungle of information, or without any information. So it's our task to promote the credible information, to provide tools to business to put on the right information, to share the right information, and to consumers to understand the information and to digest the information. Therefore, we are really glad that the program has developed over the years, so we have at least sufficient material for 1 week of conference now, that we can discuss with you all over the world the issues we think are very important in that regard. So thanks to UNEP also for hosting this conference here. It's a virtual one which allows a lot of people coming in, and then hopefully you find it very interesting. The premium product of our program is, of course, the guidelines for providing product sustainability information. These guidelines were developed in a multi-stakeholder process over some years, and were launched in 2018. And they were updated, of course, and made fit for e-commerce as well. All the 10 principles are ready for being taken up in e-commerce. So it was it's not just on paper. They were road testing with a lot of companies done in some sectors. The guidelines were applied now to plastic packaging, textiles, food, chemicals will come on, and also in e-commerce. The upcoming conference session on e-commerce, which is co-organized by Consumers International on Wednesday, will focus on that. So if you are interested, Wednesday at 2 p.m., please join us. Many resources and materials are available on the website, and there is one working group just focusing on the guidelines, and that working group is developing further these guidelines. And we had our multi-stakeholder advisory committee, which consists of 20 partner organizations, and we agreed upon that these guidelines are remaining a high priority for our program. Also, type 1 eco-labels are a very important issue, and we will discuss that on Wednesday at 12 o'clock until 1:30 Central European Standard Time. But there are other important consumer information issues which we are working upon, and which will be discussed and presented to you at this conference. And on Thursday from 10:30 to 12 European Standard Time, the cooperation with the Sustainable Food Systems program will include communication of a recent report on communicating food sustainability information to consumers. On Thursday, we will have at 2 p.m. A session on biodiversity aspects. Biodiversity is also an important issue for communication to consumers, because consumers are very much aware of biodiversity issues, and these kind of things are mainly not communicated so far, and we try to help in that regard to do that. The last session I want to point on is the session on communicating product lifetime, which is an important issue also for when you purchase, for example, white goods or IT products. And of course, it matters how long this product will last, and we will discuss that issue on Friday at 2 p.m. Having said that, I hope you find it interesting and join us also the next days, and I hand back to Helen.
Brilliant, thank you for doing that so well. So I'm sure you'll agree, lots of aspiration, a fascinating topic. At this point, it really is the right moment to turn to the consumer, to turn to what people think about this topic, how they're thinking about sustainability around the world, how they're changing their attitudes and their behaviors. For that, we're going to call on Perrine Bouana. She is the director in Paris of an organization called GlobeScan. They hold regular surveys and look into consumer perspectives, and very delighted that Perrine will share with us some very recent views on how consumers themselves are seeing this issue. Perrine.
I'll be sharing with you today is right off the press. This is actually embargoed until we release our global research program in October of this year. And the results you actually see today are from the online survey that we've run just over the summer, as in June and July. And we cover 3 big questions in the survey. What are consumers worried about? How much do they aspire to have a healthier and sustainable living, and how actually are they living it today? And if there is anything blocking them from having a healthier and sustainable lifestyle, what is that we can do as businesses in particular to enable such transition? So first, let me go over on the next page, what are consumers worried about today? At the very start of the questionnaire, we asked them a very simple question. We showed them the very list of issues that you can see here on the screen and asked them to tell us how serious they consider each of those global problems. And as you can see, worries about war and conflict now dominate global concern, but are quickly followed by climate change, as well as many environmental issues that you can see here on the screen, thus showing that sustainability very much front and center for consumers globally. But that's not just an issue that we're seeing this year or in the recent years. If you look on the next page, that's where we see how the perceived seriousness of climate change has tracked since we first asked that question back in 2012. As you can see, there's been some ups and downs, but since 2014, we're on a very steady rise of climate change concerns that are now have essentially reached unprecedented levels this year in 2022. That speaks very much to what consumers experience every day. On the next page, we've compared how much our citizens, our consumers have been personally affected by coronavirus on one end and climate change on the other. As you can see now that we've gone through wave 7 or 8 of coronavirus, the level of personal effect about this issue has kind of decreased this year compared to 2021. But when we look at climate change, we're on a steady rise. And so therefore, our consumers are living the consequences of the climate crisis every day. So essentially, we've got to rise to the challenge and address some of this concern. Now, looking at how does that translate essentially into their aspirations to have a healthier and sustainable lifestyle on the next page? Essentially, what we wanted to do here is, we know obviously that in consumer research, when we look at aspirations for healthier and sustainable living, there's always a gap between what I aspire to do as a consumer and what I actually do to change my lifestyle every day. And that's very much what we find repeatedly across the many years that we've run the research. Here on this page, we've asked 2 questions. First, on the left-hand side, how much would you change your lifestyle, you as a citizen, a consumer, to be more environmentally friendly or to be healthier? And as you can see, majorities of consumers, in particular on the healthy side, aspire to really change their lifestyle for it to be healthier or more environmentally friendly. But when we ask them the very same question as to how many changes have you made in the past year to actually make your lifestyle healthier or more environmentally friendly, that's where we see such a significant gap of about 30 points of percentage on average between aspirations and what actual changes people are making in their day-to-day lives. So that leads us to the next page and asking us who and what is needed to enable that change. If we look at the next page, that's another question that we asked in the survey as to how well each of the actors or institutions you see here on this chart, whether they be NGOs, large companies, or national government, how well are they seen by consumers to be, helping people live a more environmentally and friendly lifestyle? As we can see, NGOs are seen quite positively by 53% of consumers, but that isn't the case for large companies and national government. For large companies in particular, 42% of consumers pretty much sit on the fence. Either they don't know or they remain unconvinced, while for national governments, consumers are a lot more split, a third of it considering national governments doing a good job, another third also considering governments are doing not such a good job in addressing or enabling sustainable lifestyles. So that brings us to the very question of what is it that large companies can do? On the next page, we look at a very simple question that we've asked over the years, that is, have you as a consumer considered rewarding socially responsible companies by buying more of their products or speaking positively about them? As we can see, there's been a positive trend. When we look at this, it's in dark blue on this chart. Consumers have become more likely to consider rewarding responsible company, but they're less likely to actually do so today. And that's what you see here in green. And that really speaks again to that difference between aspirations and action. On the next page, we've actually asked a very open-ended question to our consumers and respondents, wherever they may be. What is it that companies can do? What is that you want them to do more of when it comes to healthier and more sustainable living? Some talk about more affordable products, others talk about eco-friendly materials and affordability, others talk about information. So let us look a bit closer into this. The one on the next page, what we've asked consumers who have recently bought an environmentally friendly product. So those ones who have actually acted over the past 12 months. We asked them a very simple question. How did you know that this very product was environmentally responsible? That's where green claims come in, with certifications and labels coming up first as the number one reason why consumers are making purchase decisions that are environmentally friendly, followed by the very materials and ingredients of the products, as well as packaging. As we can see, the brand and what it stands for comes up afterwards, as well as the store where you brought it or additional information provided on the company website or elsewhere. So there's a real opportunity for companies to better use certification labeling schemes when wanting to market their more sustainable and healthier products to consumers. On the next page, what we've also seen is what's not working with more than half of our consumers and citizens believing that it's actually too complicated to understand what companies are doing. And we can see it's pretty much consistent across age groups, whether we're looking at baby boomers, Gen X's, millennials, or Gen Z consumers. So there's still a bit of a way to go in terms of simplifying what is it that as companies that we're doing to make the world more environmentally responsible. And there's also some warning sign on the horizon. On the next page in particular, what we've looked at is the accessibility of environmentally friendly product. What we can see is that environmentally friendly products are pretty much visible to consumers when essentially, they are shopping. Many of them, more than half actually, report having seen some of these products in the past 12 months. But the very issue is that 3/4 claim such products have become more expensive in the past year. So in the recessionary, inflationary environment in which we're currently, how do we address the issue of accessibility and affordability of sustainable products to the many? And how do we make sure that some of the consumer behavior change we've seen over the past decade essentially does remain and doesn't get erased or canceled by the difficult economic environment in which we are? Finally, I'll just conclude on this couple last slides where, as I mentioned, we've run this research since 2019, and we've kind of tracked environmental attitudes of general consumers over the years. And what we've seen is certainly environmental conscientiousness remains very high, with large majorities continuing to acknowledge the very need for decreased consumption that Jorge was mentioning earlier. And many are obviously being very keen to reduce their personal impact. But when we look on the next page, when we look at some other environmental attitudes, we start seeing a bit of polarization around environmental action, in particular around this idea of self-empowerment. If we look at the blue line here, the light blue line, I believe that individuals cannot do much to save the environment. That really speaks to individuals now thinking that on their own as consumers, they just won't be able to do enough to fix the very major problems that we're facing. And that really signals a growing recognition that systemic changes are needed to save the environment, and that consumers essentially needs to see more coming from the companies themselves in terms of what is that they're doing to make their lives easier, to adopt a healthier and more sustainable living. These are some high-level results from our research, which I could essentially summarize as consumers being ever more concerned about the state of the environment, being ever more keen to change their lifestyle, but still being stuck in that behavior change, and the key role that companies can play, both with an information focus, using the right things that make change possible, like labeling, but being aware that the individuals themselves alone don't feel that they can do everything to save the environment, and that there's a real role for systemic changes from businesses and governments altogether. I'll pause here and be happy to take questions afterwards. Thank you for your attention.
Karina. And with that, so that was a fascinating overview that took into account the views of consumers, but also starting to look at, well, who should do what next? We all want to be action oriented. So how do we solve for this? I'm thrilled to welcome to the panel Thierry Libert. He's a member of the European Economic and Social Committee and co-president of the Consumer and Environment category. He's written a book and in fact received the Best Environmental Book Award last year for, I'll say this in French for this, a great title, Des vents porteurs, comment mobiliser enfin pour la planète, which means the carrying winds, or and how to finally, at long last, mobilize for the planet. So a very warm welcome to you, Thierry. Elisa, thank you for staying with us, because now we're going to sort of move from, all right, consumers, they have these barriers. What are the barriers? How do we think about roles, responsibility, and collaboration? And then dive into, with both of you, the role of policymakers first. And then we'll start looking at the other roles and responsibilities as we go on. So thank you for being with us for that first opening part and into policymaking. Maybe Elisa, I'll just come to you first. That sort of, what are the barriers and how do you think about roles and responsibilities of the different stakeholders that you have to put together in your job? And are you seeing collaboration that's a little bit different?
Yeah, so it's actually an equation that will not be solved by one player only. And it's absolutely critical that everybody is on board in creating that solution. So we've been alluding in some of the survey results, in some of the interventions before, and the role of companies. We're actually talking about radically changing the way in which the production and consumption system works. We're actually pushing towards a more circular way of production. And for many of them, it's really about questioning the business model. So definitely there needs to be a strong willingness to take that step. Willingness to take that step doesn't happen in the vacuum. So Helena, you alluded to the role of regulation. That's definitely important to create two key elements in the context. One being the role of creating the enabling conditions that allow all market players to be part of that transformation to sustainability, to circularity. But another important role is also around leveling the playing field, having those changes happening in a specific geography, in a specific context, or by the front runners is not going to be enough. We like leaders, but we want followers as well. So definitely that's the second ingredient of the equation. We also need investment to change. So we've been talking about radical transformation of business models to create that sustainable consumption and production system, that circular economy. We need new infrastructure. We need that system to function effectively. So importantly, we need public and private finance to also go into the direction of supporting this transformation, rewarding those market actors that have the courage to take the lead in that transformation. And last but not least, we need, I would say, individuals, in addition to consumers, to really feel that they are part of the solution. And it's about communicating to them, inspiring them, making them see that the transformation that we're talking about is a positive one that is around well-being, one that is around making them enjoy the beauty of the environment, but also preserving their economic and social opportunities at the same time. So there's no one who will be able to do that individually, but definitely with this alignment of effort and with a common vision, that can definitely be achieved.
Fantastic, thank you. Do you share
Yes,
this view?
I totally agree. I think that companies share a lot of responsibility, but they will pay a high price for the consequences. And as it is often said, there will be no business on a dead planet. And the main problem is not to find a person who will be responsible for all, but in the sharing of responsibility between firms, consumers, clients, and public authorities. So the problem is sharing responsibility and not to find which is the most responsible of the problem.
Excellent, thank you. Now we're here, I would love to ask you specifically about the European Directive, which is, and I don't know what whether this is a direct translation, but I love that it's about empowering consumers for the green transition. Now within that, there is a specific point on misleading environmental claims, which is of great relevance to our topic here today on consumer information. But perhaps give us a sort of a sense of the overarching directive and what you feel is particularly important about that in light of the roles, responsibilities, changes you've just talked about.
Yes, I think it's an important moment in the European Union. It was on March the 30th of this year, and the European Commission published a proposal for a directive empowering consumers in the green transition, which contain a lot of propositions to improve things about informing consumers. This proposal for a directive aims to strengthen consumer rights by amending two other directives protecting consumer interests at EU level. Directive from 2005 on unfair commercial practice, and directive from 2011 on consumer rights. The new proposal aims to contribute to circular, clean, and green EU economy by enabling consumers to take informed purchasing decisions and thereby contributing to more sustainable consumption. It also targets unfair commercial practices that mislead consumers away from sustainable consumption choice. The proposal was one of the initiatives set out of the new consumer agenda and the Circular Economy Action Plan, and follow up the European Green Deal. So there is a dynamic and a coherence between all these texts. To be concrete, the proposal addresses two aspects. Lack of information at the point of sale regarding the environmental impacts of products, bearing in mind that 61% of consumers say they cannot distinguish truly responsible products. Some consumers said, I want to have information to act as a responsible consumer, but I can distinguish which product is really responsible. Particular attention is paid to information of the repairability and lifespan of products. And the second aspect is the fight against greenwashing. A company cannot claim credit for positive impacts that are required to put in place by regulation or by legal obligation. And I will add one point. Its particular attention is also paid to environmental labels. In Europe, there are more than 430 environmental labels, mostly self-proclaimed, without particular justification. In my view, this is a major step forward. And in my role as advisor at the European Economic and Social Committee, I was given the responsibility of tabling this proposal. And it's worth noting that in a vote last July of all the members of the committee, my recommendation was carried unanimously. That means that all the large companies, all the SMEs in Europe, all the trade unions, all the consumer associations, and all the environmental NGOs consider it's an important topic to work on and to make progress. And I think that we can draw a great encouragement from this.
Fantastic. Give us a bit of a sense of how big the problem is that you're trying to deal with. I mean, I know that's sort of the famous stat now about 40% of online claims on sustainability being misleading. What are we trying to change here?
The fact is, a very large number of consumers say, I have great expectation and I'd like to act in a responsible way. But I have no information. I have no information on the product in itself, on the packaging of the products, and all the advertising said that this product is very well for the planet. So we try to make some rigor in this way, and particularly considering three aspects. First aspect is there is a very big inconvenience for the company itself. Because a company who claim with no justification on environmental aspect of the product will certainly have an impact on its reputation, notably with bad buzz, the fact that all the people, all the citizens are more and more sensitive to greenwashing. So there is an important risk for this company. But there is also an important risk for the company which conducts their activity well, because they enter in competition with companies with massive advertising and no justification for their products. And in general, the fact is that it contributes to a very big mistrust from consumers to the companies. So the problem is not just to give more information to the consumer, but also to act, to have more trust between consumer and companies.
Okay. And give us a sense, in 5 years' time, what do you want to have seen from that particular directive? And are there other pieces that you want to put in place related to consumer information specifically? What are you dreaming of as you mobilize all of our consommateurs in Europe?
I think that what we can expect in the 3 years is that the fact that when a consumer will want to buy a product, he will have an information on the possibility of repairability and the lifespan of the product. We have tested this in Europe in 4 countries, and we have seen that consumers are ready to pay a bit more to have a longer product, longer durability lifespan of the product. So it's interesting for the consumer, but it's also interesting for the company because the people are ready to pay a bit more. So to have a longer lifestyle of products, but also the fact that the products will be more easily reparable because near the environmental aspect of the product, it's also a big interest in employment because all the employees of reparability in Europe have stepped down dramatically. It's 16% of employees less in Europe in reparability during the 20 last years. So what we want is to have better information on the product, on the environmental aspects of the product, and also more rigor in environmental claims, not to say that all the product will be carbon neutral, eco-friendly, and so on, as it was shown in the presentation.
Perfect. And maybe just a last question to you before I'd love to come to Elisa and understand if this European perspective is also being replicated elsewhere. What is driving the enfin in the title? What is finally making the difference for how we empower consumers?
I think to empower consumer, we have to change the way we address them. Because I think that on environmental matters, the general discourse of companies, of public authorities, is very technical. It's often dramatic, and it cannot mobilize. As you have said, I work for the European institution, and I saw that the beginning of Europe was not on economic interaction, but on the desire for peace. To take an example in a totally another topic, the great discourse of Martin Luther King in the United States was not a presentation of segregational, ethnic, etc. It was, I have a dream. And I think that all the message on environmental in Europe and in the world is on to reduce CO2, to reduce greenhouse gas. What we want to say is what is able to mobilize a population, and what can mobilize us is to have clean air, to have no stress way of life, to have a good way of taking our shopping. And if we agree on these goals, I think that the fight against climate change will appear to be not a goal, but only a mean to reach this goal. So what I want to say is that we have to change our way of communicating about green gas emission and climate change, and we have to find a way of given expectation and the desire of changing our way of life.
Excellent. So Elisa, then, as we listen to the experience of in Europe and the leadership in terms of putting the right policy and playing field in place, can we see signs? Would you give examples from the rest of the world of and also how can we find this dream together at a time when perhaps the world is slightly more fragmented than in the past as well?
Absolutely, and I think my response will speak a lot to the role that the program, the One Planet Network program, and the partners around it can really play in bringing experiences such as the one that Thierry was sharing to the global community and inspire them for action. And the guideline for providing product sustainability information that we have seen on video and we have alluded to in earlier interventions have been an amazing inspiration. And countries such as Colombia are just running with this idea to shape regulations around it. But they're not the only country that is keen to move ahead on this front. Costa Rica and Ukraine are working on law on type 1 eco-labels. Peru, Portugal, and the UK are also working on existing regulations to bring a number of elements in. So it's really very much around the ideas of being able to create in the space, in the community that we have created, a safe space to learn, maybe to learn from those experiences that have not necessarily been triggering the change that we wanted, but also to learn from what has been successful and that what has led to transformative change. And Thierry was alluding to a number that I had to write, the 430 environmental labels in Europe. And one of the projects on which we're working in Latin America is giving me hope. It's a project that brings together the region under the Sello Ambiental de América, which is an environmental label for a large number of countries in the region that they intend to use for specific categories of product across the region. So there's possibly also an opportunity to cross-learn from experiences that are materializing around the world, and that will probably make it easier, less confusing, more pragmatic to bring those experiences, those lessons learned forward. And Thierry, and the presentation that Pierrine was also delivering, made me think of an additional element on which the program also, the consumer information program also has been working a lot, and that you alluded to, the breach between information and action. And what was coming to my mind is one of the amazing reports that the program has developed, which goes by the title, Can I Recycle These? That focuses on plastic packaging, an issue which is very much on the spotlight these days, and is looking at the way in which information is conveyed to consumers and inspiring them to close loop with their plastic packaging. And it's impressive, even for us who claim to be expert on the subject, how confusing the information that is conveyed is. So it's no surprise that we're still at times challenged by not seeing necessarily action that is following the information that is provided. And it's probably for us a positive challenge to take on board and see how we can put all our efforts in bridging these gaps.
Brilliant, thank you. So you both talked about the key barrier that's sort of between intention and action, which is just, how do I know what to do? There's so much different information, you know, making that simple and making sure it's not misleading as well and leads into the right. One final question before we come to any questions from the floor, I think. How would you, with your experience as in policy, as we look at COP and the conversations about the environment and policy on a global level, it does strike me it's sort of, there's a very much lack of conversation about the consumption side, very much production driven. How do we make that conversation about sustainable consumption and production be a constructive part of the conversations that are going on? Do you have any thoughts on that?
No, I am quite optimistic on this topic because since 12 years that I work for the European institution, I think that since 2010, there is a new dynamic. The fact that in all the projects, and notably the Circular Economy Action Plan, 2 years ago, the role of the consumer has been introduced. And circular economy is not seen only from eco-consumption on one side and reuse on the other side, but also with consumer practice, and notably durability of the product, lifespan of the product, collaborative economy, and sharing economy, and functional economy. Is to say, for a company to sell the utilization of the product and not the possession of this product. So I think that now a dynamic is taken, and that's why I'm quite optimistic. But I think that one of the main problem we have to fight is this one, is to say the gap, how to bridge the gap between expectation, what me consumer I want to do, and what I really do. I just take rapidly an example. I was during 4 years administrator of Fairtrade International. So I work on Fairtrade, and I saw some polls saying that 95% of the population in Europe says they have a good opinion of Fairtrade. 66, 2/3 of Europeans said, when I go shopping, I buy Fairtrade products. And as an administrator, I have the business model and all the facts. And in fact, in Europe, each consumer in Europe only buy Fairtrade products for 20 euros, is to say nothing. Is to say some bananas, a packet of chocolate or of coffee, it's all. So we can see a great gap between what I want to do and what I do. And the main problem is how to go, how to give information to the consumer to say, okay, it's fair trade, but it's also very good for you, and it's not very expensive. So we see that the fact that we can give more information with a lot of rigor, it helps to help people.
Excellent, thank you.
I'm going to come with a reflection that somehow resonates with the entry point that Thierry has been using, because I guess that the expression that made a little bit more of a leeway so far in the COP discussions has been circular economy, intended as an approach to bring about sustainable consumption and production. But the impression that we were getting from what was happening in Glasgow was that it was still a conversation happening at the level of side events, and not necessarily a conversation that was permeating what was happening in the plenary. So I guess that what stays with us as a challenge is what is needed for us to have the arguments that are required to enter the plenary. And probably it's very much around bringing our understanding of what the potential are in a number of concrete experiences. There's a number of NDCs, national determined contributions in countries where there's room to test and explore the impact of bringing sustainable consumption and production together, or bringing circular economy in. I guess this will probably be our next challenge. Try and come with concrete data on how impactful we've been in a number of countries in, lifting the ambition of nationally determined contribution, and get open doors for that conversation to move from a conversation of side events to a conversation in plenary.
Excellent. Thank you both. Stay with me. We actually have some fantastic comments online, but not necessarily questions at this point. So we're actually just going to invite in 4 other speakers from around the world at this point. I'm thrilled to welcome, we have Fatima Abu Abbas. She is from a consumer advocacy organization, Consumers Lebanon, and she's in the Next Generation Leaders Network. A warm welcome to you, Fatima. Hello.
Hello, thank
we
you.
have Paul Akira. He's the coordinator for the Life Cycle Assessment Network in Uganda. He's also part of the Consumer Information Leadership Group. Helio Matar, director of the Akira Institute. He's dialing in from Brazil. And Rijit Sengupta is the CEO of the Center for Responsible Business in India. So I'm thrilled that we're really able to have, while sitting here at UNEP headquarters, we're able to have, thanks to the wonder of WebEx, is it, rather than Zoom, we're really able to have a proper global conversation. So to all of you, and I'll ask you in turn to share your opinions in the order that you were introduced. I'd really like to give your reactions, your sense of, all right, but this is the way I see the consumer information problem, the barriers and the solutions, and perhaps any reactions to what you've heard so far. And then we will segue into how businesses are approaching the consumer information questions and bring them in, after which I think our brains will be ready for the next days with a little bit of a rest first. So Fatima, a warm welcome to you. Could you share, when you think of consumer information as a consumer advocate, what for you are the main barriers and challenges? What should we be doing next?
Okay, first of all, thank you for being here today. I'm Fatima from Lebanon. It's an honor to have the opportunity to address such as distinguished audience. I'm here today to talk about our case study in Lebanon, about consumers and how we can turn information into action. First of all, every day we make choices in our lives that affect the environment and the climate and other species. So, as Consumer Lebanon, we have a big role in our community to educate the Lebanese consumers and to collecting data on different products and testing them. Also, we want to extend support to government. We educate public about their rights and to organizing seminars and training and workshop for all ages and gender. Also, our Lebanese consumers are largely unaware of what to choose to avoid potential health and environment risks. We have a critical challenges which would disqualify Lebanon from implementing the 2030 Agenda on Sustainable Development Goals. These challenges include political instability, refugee crisis, socio-economic policy choices, social protection taxes, lack of data, and lack of gender equality. Also, nowadays we have a crisis, an economic crisis that would be the biggest in all the world. The young Lebanese consumers show a strong willingness to increase spend on sustainable products such as solar power, home insulation, and electrical vehicles. In addition to personal responsibility, the young consumers feel a need for banning and taxation of sustainable products, as well as greater education and stricter governance and reporting requirement for corporates. Consumers can indeed be active market players when they are informed of their rights and stand ready to enforce them. So, because of that, as Consumer Lebanon, we try always and every year to make and to raise the awareness among youth in universities, in our municipalities, to produce, for example, flyers about organic food, producing flyers about circular economy. So when we have, for example, a number of participants, like 350 participate our awareness, so we have turning the information to 350s to benefit from the information in our work. For example, in 2018, we have a project with Green Action Week about Ati and Ahmed. Arabic words mean give and protect, to raise the awareness on the importance of circular economy that can be even used on a whole level and have impact in the sustainability development in 3 pillars: the social, the natural, and the economical one. Also, we always collaborate with NGOs and municipalities to work together in topics that will share awareness not only on personal level but on the level of organization. In, for example, 2018 and today 2019, we have working on protect our community from waste, because we have a big challenge to reduce waste. Consumer Lebanon is targeting the new Lebanese generation to share, to reduce their waste in homes, schools, and universities. We want to increase the access to sustainable goods and services and to achieve environmental benefits. For example, in 2020, because we have the pandemic and the COVID-19, we think about reducing the plastic waste by turning the plastic bottles of water to think about it, to share love of our environment by seedling and by sharing their activities on social media, for example, and to protect our environment by growing their seeds and protect them. And in 2021, we forced our work to raise awareness about sharing community and to support young child in learning to share their toys. It's important to share with our community, because if we do, other people will follow us and will follow our footsteps, and the world would be a happier place. It affects people in a. We also always has attracted many people in our community, especially because they want to change, they want to know more, and to turn our information to action in our community in a wide level. And thank you.
You tell me, what is the top question that you would love to learn out of the rest of this week on consumer information specifically?
I would like to know more about.
Oh, apologies, we're talking about.
Yeah, you can hear. Okay. When I'm looking to the agenda, I think there's a many sessions that I would like to join you, especially to information is one of the big, to know more about sustainable consumption, and this is be a positive effect in our work on like awareness in our action.
Thank you everyone for your patience with the technical, even 2 years into the pandemic, we are all still learning, so thank you for your patience. Thank you so much, Fatima. I'd love to come to Helio at this point. Helio, I think you were one of the original leaders behind the guidelines on sustainability information that we saw at the very start of this. Have we evolved our understanding? Have things changed? Would you agree with what you've heard to date? What would you like to see us focus in on in the course of this week?
Now I'm not on mute. Thank you, Helena, for your introduction. Definitely there was progress in the area of consumer information, and I think UNEP was extremely helpful and not only helpful, instrumental in developing consumer information as a broad topic in sustainability. I would like to talk a little bit about what is the situation in Brazil, and I would start by pointing out the naive expectation by many companies and brands in Brazil of getting increased sales by simply improving a few sustainability attributes of their products. Although there are lots of evidence that Brazilian consumers are very interested in learning about the sustainability efforts by companies and brands, my long-time observation of the activities of companies showed that there are very, very, very few cases in which shots of sustainability in some products may result in better sales and in a better position in consumer preferences. Consumers are strongly interested in sustainability attributes of companies and brands, as shown by Perrine in the 2022 study of the Healthy and Sustainable Living by GlobeScan, in which Akatu was a partner for the analysis of data in Brazil. Using the data from 2021, it's easy to demonstrate consumers' interest in sustainability information. It's sufficient to say that 87% of consumers in Brazil are interested in learning what companies are doing to restore and improve nature and the environment. 83% on what companies are doing to generate real value for society beyond just making a profit. And 60% are willing to pay more for products or brands that work to improve society and the environment. On the other hand, when consumers are asked what would help them to buy more sustainable products, to your question, Helena, on the barriers for consumers, 59% of Brazilian consumers say they would like to know how to find those products at a lower price, as Perrine already mentioned before. This seems to be a contradiction, since consumers seem to be more interested in low prices when looking for sustainability than sustainability itself. But if one looks at the sources of information on what are the brands doing to help consumers live in a more sustainable way, only 42% of the Brazilian consumers say they have had access to that information. 58% of those from social media, 43% of those from advertising. That clearly indicates that the availability and accessibility of information is absolutely key, as many of you already mentioned before. Another indication of the lack of reliable sustainability information on products and brands to be used by consumers is that only 12% of consumers in general in Brazil say they use packaging as a source of information, and just 10% use the sites of companies as a source of information. This clearly means that consumers do not have sufficiently easy and accessible information to enable their decisions to buy more sustainable products, and the myriad of eco-labels, although very important, as it was mentioned by Thierry, in Europe 470 eco-labels, has been more useful in the B2B purchase choices than to the final consumers. So there is definitely a strong need for a simple system to reliably inform consumers on the sustainability performance of companies and brands, as you already mentioned, Helena, probably based on the hotspots or critical sustainability attributes of products and brands in each category. This system remains to be conceptualized and developed, and this is something that Akatu is in the process of doing right now, among other organizations around the world. Meanwhile, a company brand in Brazil will be in one of three situations while we don't have such a system. Even if we consider that communication on product sustainability follows UNEP's guidelines. The first situation is one in which companies have been born sustainable. They tend to be very effective in establishing and keeping a reputation of sustainability as long as it actually remains a priority effort. A second situation is when companies have structurally worked for sustainability in a consistent, reliable, and continuous way for a very long time, and strongly communicates it, then it will also tend to be very effective in reaching and keeping a reputation of sustainability. Finally, a third group of companies whose efforts towards sustainability are more fragmented, product-centered, which are the great majority of companies, with no sustainability plan in place, and allows them to allow them to reliably state why they are more sustainable. These companies will take forever to be recognized as such, as being more sustainable, if it happens. In summary, there is lots to be done by companies and brands, and especially in developing easy to use and accessible instruments at the moment of purchase that will clearly and reliably indicate to consumer which products to consume. UNEP's effort in the guidelines for product sustainability is extremely helpful in that direction, but it helps more the companies on how to structure the information to be communicated to consumer, rather than what the consumer really needs in terms of a simple system at the point of sale, at the moment of purchase, with simple information about the sustainability of a product or a brand. These are my observations for now. Thank you, Helena.
Thank you so much, Helio. I really enjoyed that combination of hearing about the state of consumers in Brazil, the problems and challenges, and then a really fascinating framework, plus your own work that I hope we will hear more about during the course of this week. If I could come to Rijit, in terms of the way in which consumers are perceiving this in India, perhaps some of the policy responses, which have been, there are a number of pieces of new news recently, and then your sort of, how would you respond on a framework, the ways in which businesses should pick up the challenge that Perrine talked about at the very start?
Thank you so much, Helena, for that question, and of course to the organizers for inviting us. I'd like to respond in, what I understand about 3 minutes. So there are 3 points that I'd like to make. The first is about why should companies engage consumers with sustainability information? Just the basic background of the context, and building on what Perrine and Helio have mentioned. There is definitely data also in India, wherein we are seeing that a large number of consumers, and of course consumers are not a monolith, so looking specifically at youth and young consumers, 78% of Indian consumers are willing to change their purchasing practices to reduce the negative impacts on the environment. That data is available publicly. 60% of consumers are also willing to pay more, Helio, like our Brazilian brothers and sisters, for sustainable products. But another piece of data which struck us was that about 60% of Indian consumers are actually turning away from companies which are perceived to be unsustainable. And I think that's a very, very interesting sort of trend. So while we might not be able to provide information to consumers on, or companies are not able to sort of satisfy the information about, how they are contributing on climate, environment, and of course the social side, which often gets overlooked, companies will have to pay a price if they sort of, fall down a basic minimum of being sustainable. And that's perhaps an area where companies really need to focus on. And especially true in markets where there is a fair bit of competition, and especially markets which are consumer facing. For example, the usual suspects of electronics, textiles, FMCG. So now, what are businesses doing really in order to sort of engage consumers? And if you go back to these 3 sectors, if you look at these 3 sectors and the experience that we see in India, I think from our experience, the most advanced is probably the FMCG companies, and especially certain segments. When you look at some of the segments like tea, coffee, chocolate, you'll see a fair bit of companies which are actually adopting voluntary schemes and standards But not only that, they're also developing their own company-driven schemes as well. And that definitely has, there is an opportunity, I guess, we believe, in engaging, especially the youth consumers. But what they're not doing is, and there is so much to be done on sort of providing information to the youth consumers about the efforts that are being made to protect the environment, preserve biodiversity, but not just that, also on the social side, for example, engaging the smallholder or marginal farmers, engaging the value chain actors, promoting jobs, so on and so forth. So I think that on the sustainability agenda, often it seems that the conversation is really skewed towards the environment and the climate side, and we seem to sort of be a little less attentive to the social side, which is very, very critical for Fatima and Leo and my countries. Now, let us look at the other sectors very quickly after the FMCG, apparel and textile. So in the apparel and textile sector, in spite of the fact that there are large brands and buyers involved, really the engagement of consumers in a producing country largely like India is not that much. And there is perhaps a lot of opportunity on issues which I think, Thierry, if I heard you right, and Elisa as well, who mentioned about circularity. So apparel and textile, because of the fact that you use a lot of water, energy, and materials, companies can definitely start. And if you look at the electronic sector, the last one, very little is being done by electronic companies, MNCs, Indian companies, you name it, on how they should engage the consumers. I mean, in all our countries, there is exponential growth in terms of electronic waste. In India, it's about 30 to 40% year on year. It's incredible. And also, after COVID and this whole sort of virtual existence that we have, but electronic companies are really not doing much. I mean, there is some sale of refurbished phones here and there, some small take-back schemes here and there, but that's definitely not enough. And perhaps there's an opportunity for those companies to sort of start investing. Now, we've been using the word businesses sort of broadly. It is also important to break them up into MNCs, domestic firms, and one more segment, which is really we're not probably focusing on, are the startups. And startups, especially in India, for example, there are so many startups which are extremely purpose-driven, and their whole genesis comes from a sustainability challenge, but they're not communicating to consumers because they have not been coached to do that. So I guess that's an area again where there has to be much more work to be done. Finally, what are the sort of, in terms of concluding remarks, to to sort of start getting the businesses to take action? I think there are three key elements that we would like to suggest. One is to lean on values and policies. All companies are increasingly talking about company values and policies. So look at that. Look at the basic values that the company sort of exists for. Then we are calling identifying market and target. Identify the particular product market where there's an opportunity to engage consumers and target those consumers with the right kind of messaging and tools to be able to start that conversation. And thirdly, and most importantly, start within your limits. Do whatever you can, but start on that journey, because it's going to be a journey. It's a bumpy ride. Be aware of that. But it is important to ignite, to do the ignition and start the engine and sort of start and maybe start with a small experiment of a particular product category, but you must. Thank you so much.
So much. Thank you so much, Richard. Do we have Paul on the line in Uganda? I would love to hear. He's been on with us for a day and a half for our pre-meeting, and it's just a wonderful. Really encourage you to connect with Paul from the Life Cycle Assessment Group as a brilliant voice on this topic. So I wish we could hear, but perhaps you may be able to join as we move forward. So that conversation built up a lot of expectation for business action on this. I'd love to just briefly come back to Thierry and Elisa in the room, and ahead of, as we welcome Arturo Gaetan and Marie Johansson, who will be giving the business perspective from Cemex and Colgate, respectively. As you know, we've talked here about the policy approach. Here we're going around the world, and there's very much a business expectation. Any reactions to that? Any reactions to the frameworks?
Paul has just joined. Just joined, I think.
Oh, fantastic. Excuse me. In which case, I would love if we could just to hear Paul. Can you hear us on the line?
Oh, yeah, he's not there.
We're suffering connectivity problems, I think. We thought we had Paul.
He's saying he's there, but in the chat.
I'm just gonna, maybe if the team here could have a go and see if we can bring him online, but in the room here and for the moment. Any reactions to what you've heard and the experience around the world?
Yes, perhaps two reflections. First, and encouragement one, is the fact that we tackle the same types of problems, and we have the same way of reflection on this topic, and to give best information to the consumer, and we saw that it works. So it's very positive. Another, perhaps less, is the fact that to really empower consumer in the green transition, we have also to tackle other kinds of problems, other that green claims or better information for the consumer. I think of the role of advertising in the green transition. How it's possible to go to ecological transition, to go to less consuming, without an advertising system which each day envoy 3,000 ads to each of us to make that each consumer consume more and more. So you say that we try to mobilize consumers and citizens to ecological transition and to have less consumption. But how is it possible with this kind of advertising system? So I think that one time we have also to have a reflection on to sensibilize consumer. When consumer association, environmental NGO address 4-5 messages each day to each citizen, but advertising system envoy about 3,000. So there is a large difference. So I think that to go forward on this topic, we have one day to have the advertising system in the reflection.
Excellent point. And even the training, sort of the way in which we're taught about how business should act, and the way in which, sort of from a very early stage in one's career, you're taught about, well, how business should engage with consumers even. Yeah, excellent point.
I'm actually going to do a segue and actually make reference to a couple of comments that I'm seeing on screen.
Thank you.
From Delali, who is writing from Ghana, and Mopelola, I hope I'm reading the name accurately, that is sharing a comment from Africa. Because I think we are indeed in a point of our conversation where we're gathering a lot of what is happening and at the scale at which it's happening. And we're somehow pushed to wonder, how can we bring it to a different scale? And the two interventions were really very much around opinion leaders, influencers, that can go beyond the usual community of those who are in this room and online and are used to talk about this subject, and to use different channels to get to inspire others, as Thierry was saying, with a positive message, to go more about sustainability and circularity and you name it. And Thierry was mentioning advertising. There's also a lot of power in the movie industry. So all our role models or who inspire us, it's probably also about, you know, going beyond the traditional channels that we have thought of, and really get to who is actually touching us as individual and stays in our mind and has such a strong influence because of those messages being repeated so many times. So I think we should be looking into the scale aspect beyond all the good experience that have been shared with us from across the world.
That's a great point. And even to, you know, I know there's a project, I believe, which is based at UNEP, looking at the way in which sustainability information comes via games, online games.
Yes.
You know, where are people? Where are they thinking about this? And how do we bring information in an appropriate, constructive way that they can use and that drives to action? I believe, I'm told, in fact, Paul, you can join us. You're wonderful. Thank you for being with us. Sorry, we had a disconnect there. Can you hear me? And
yes, I can hear you. Can you hear me? Very well. Thank you.
we'd love to. Okay. Paul, welcome to the conversation, and we'd love to hear your view. You know, what you would love to hear in the rest of the conference, essentially, and make sure, give us the starting point. Where are we in your opinion? What are the key challenges consumers face? Is it really intention to action? What are the barriers? And back to that question. So what are we trying to answer in the remainder of this week? Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much. Fortunately, I've been following the discussions, and maybe you have not been hearing me. Yes, I'm just going to echo. Well, actually, the situation from our side is that there's a shift with the consumers. They're interested in knowing how their consumption impacts the environment. Previously, the focus was much on the safety of the product and health of that the product might have on the individual. But now the shift is there, and that and the consumers would like to know what their consumption patterns contributes to impacting the environment negatively. The thing is that there's an influx of when it comes communicating the sustainability information is where the challenge is. Given the fact that the consumers, of course, they based so much on what has been given to them, and when we talk about these issues of sustainability, they don't know the technical know-how. They look at either the label or somebody say this is green, it is recyclable, and entirely it depends on what the companies or business has declared. And of course, you are aware that, and this has also been discussed, there are some companies that haven't been transparent in communicating the sustainability of their product, which may result into greenwashing. And of course, because now that there is a push for the consumers to choose the best product that actually they believe that will be able to conserve the environment, there's need for the companies to do out of their work actually, instead of to communicate exactly what this means, the numbers that we see on the products, what do they translate to in terms of saving the environment. For example, in Uganda, we have an influx of plastic pollution, and most of the products, especially plastic bottles, they say they are recyclable, but the information that is given on the bottle cannot facilitate recycling for the consumers, if somebody wants to go and pick these products wherever they have been dumped, to do recycling, because different resins will be recycled differently based on the information. So if the information is not concrete, it's not clear to the consumer. And looking at our side this way, we have in between there, beside the consumers, you have the business, but you also have the regulator who is in between there. And the regulator is going to work as an interface between the consumer and the business. Even to the regulators in this case, that information is still confused. So there is a need for the companies, businesses to go out of their way to ensure that actually what they communicate is credible and can be interpreted. Now, looking at the other question, what I look forward to see this week is how companies can better communicate this information to the consumers in a clear and concrete way. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Paul. So that's a perfect segue to introduce our last two speakers. And I'm thrilled that they're here because we've talked a lot about what business can do. We're now going to hear from Marie Johansson, who is the Director of Product Sustainability for Colgate Palmolive. Marie, I believe you're joining us from New York. Is that correct?
Just outside of New York in New Jersey. Close enough. Great to be here.
Thank you so much for joining us. And also we have Arturo Gaitan, who is Innovation and Sustainability Manager in Cemex. I believe you're hailing from Mexico City today with us.
Yeah.
And thank you for joining this truly global conversation. We're here in Paris at UNEP's headquarters, but we're really thinking globally about a couple of things. And if I say we have incredibly high expectations that businesses will take their responsibility around consumer information, I'd love it if you could share the approaches that you're taking and also the challenges that you face and the way in which other stakeholders can work with you to make sure that we move intention to action. Marie, both of you I should mention, are known at UNEP for having thought about and used the guidelines that Helio and Ulf were part of building. And so you're really speaking from a position of experience in having put these guidelines into practice, and I think can give us thoughts on how we might make them even more useful. Marie, could I bring you into the conversation first? Share your experience at Colgate Palmolive.
It has been a fantastic experience, and we are now have sustainability in our corporate strategy. It is linked into our mission, and I will show that on my slides later. And I think the engagement, and somebody mentioned it earlier, the engagement with the consumer in a real way is where we need to go, and that's what I'm going to show you an example of today. Okay, so it is really my pleasure to take you through this in terms of how we have engaged consumers, and specifically here, this is how to save water. So if we move to the next slide, and as I mentioned, this is really anchored in our corporate sustainability mission. And at Colgate Palmolive, we are really proud that we are in more homes than any others. So we can and we will create a healthier, more sustainable future for all. So as I said, this is part of our global mission. And that'll then take us to our sustainability strategy, which is on the next slide. And I'm not going to go into details, but the top 3 areas is first, driving social impact. We are committed to ensuring well-being of those that we serve, building a culture of inclusivity, creating meaningful opportunities for all people to succeed, both inside and outside of Colgate. And secondly, in the middle, we are committed to helping millions of homes living more sustainable lives through designing more sustainable products and help people build more sustainable habits. And those are the topics that I will do a couple of slides on today. And lastly, we are, of course, committed to preserving our environment in areas as saving water, eliminating plastic waste that somebody was mentioning before, and of course, act on climate change. And if you are interested in learning more about this, there are a whole lot more details on our website. So I encourage you to go there before we go to the next slide. So let me now move to our Save Water campaign and how we approached consumers. We know that a significant majority of consumers want to live a more sustainable lifestyles, but sometimes it is really challenging to change behaviors and habits. So we have to make it easy. And if you go to the next slide, this is a summary of our commercial that you can actually find on YouTube. And it is highlighting what can be done with the water that you can go to the next slide. What comes out of the, what you can do with the water that comes out of the faucet while you're brushing your teeth. It shows people from water-stressed areas using it to drink, wash, for food preparation, and at the end, we remind everyone to turn off the tap while they're brushing their teeth. And by doing so, there is a value of about 10 liters of water. That is a significant amount of water for just one set of toothbrush. So turn off the tap. It is a habit changing, but it has no negative impacts on your personal experience as you are building a more sustainable lifestyle. So if you go to the next slide, so here is the outcome. We have done this for several years now. Consumers have contributed to a significant reduction of water use, and thereby that also impacts the carbon, so that's a lower carbon impact. And if you look at the logo in the middle, it is now our Save Water information and website, and it is used on our oral care products, which is part of the commercial, but it is also used on personal care products, which would be body wash and shampoo, and home care products that are used for cleansing. And it's really there to help consumers remember that they can save water in their regular daily habits that really is going to have a minimal impact on the quality of their life, but really will have an impact for the world. And this video and commercial was followed by a global activation campaign in stores, billboards, with a very simple message: turn off the faucet while you're brushing. And we have also activated marketing campaigns on social media platforms to engage all consumers. It is important to find them where they are and where they're looking for the information. And in addition, if you are online, you might also notice that we have a very active and voluntary employee population on social media platforms that will share news, perspective, and engagement to help drive this on a daily basis. So with that, I will hand it over to Arturo. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Marie. Apologies for the technical difficulty. And now, yes, Arturo, I believe you are going to tell us a little bit more about actually applying the guidelines and what that means. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. First of all, environmental program for the invitation to share our experience in communicating the systems. Well, CEMEX in Mexico has participated with the application of the sustainable product information to customers in 2021. The guide to 3 products from our construction concrete portfolio, which have such a Vertua, which is a low carbon cement and concrete. There is a CEMEX, which promotes circular economy by being manufactured by recycle or reuse or by products from other industries. And Pervia, which is a permanent passage of water, mainly rainwater, from groundwater recharge for storage. Next slide, please. One of the most important lessons is that we must teach to our customers and raise awareness, not only in the customers, but in the. It is important before trying to communicate to our customers and our stakeholders. It is important too that our customers understand what lighting its sustainable attributes. They must understand what the problem is facing as humanity and as a society, and why a product with less environmental impacts or to the planet. The main barrier that we have identified is the vocabulary we use. The customers are used to understand. The topic of the sustainability is a large part of the population, or at least in Latin America. And there are still many concepts or words that refers to the sustainability issues, or our clients and our customers are not sustainability experts. So it is very easy to fall into the greenwashing. In our construction industry, there is a large part that is dedicated to the self-construction. So often have basic levels of education. So the ways maybe is different from the correct one. For example, referring to a or ecological and not a sustainable. They handle different concepts. Just start with awareness campaigns, even posters and webinars in all our operations inside the company. We are salespeople with a basic sustainability topics that will allow us with our customers about sustainability, and even can share. We create a sustainability academy at all levels in our organization. Will aware of how their daily works affects sustainability. Once this was done, we organized publications to our clients and influencers, like architects or structural investors, who have an who have an important election on the decisions in the projects. So we create materials with any of our clients and stakeholders can consult and lead on products issues and their sustainable attributes. To create or generate equivalencies of impacts to better understand, for example, a certain amount of CO2 reduced or emitted by a product, amount of CO2 absorbed or correspond in a number of trees or cars item daily. One of the big challenges too is often the cost or the overprice they have, the famous green premium. Our products that has an attribute of being low carbon was launched in all the 2021. It was a premium product because it has an additional price. In 2022, Cemex in Mexico decided to eliminate that and absorb the cost by ourselves. So because we believe that the sustainable product should not. So in this way, the customers receive, and that now at the same price, they will have a product with lower carbon footprint. So we also let them know the impact of, so they have a better understanding of the impact, the materials they use in them. So the way in which we organize and have access to the necessary information we need was that with various departments of the company. So it was formed by the marketing, sales, and the technical areas, which together with the form a sustainability committee that consensually address and socialize the communication campaigns. All messages by this working group before they go out. So about the feedback of our clients, at the beginning, they always question the veracity of that the product or the service is sustainable. They want to be certain of the information, at least to know what make them. Finally, an important part of the sustainable products is to continue feeling that the product is in addition is being sustainable, maintains its quality and its compliance with any regulation. That allow us to know the carbon footprint of the use of the concrete, or we made them publish the impacts of our materials in their invoices. So information such as the emission or reduction of the CO2 in each of our them more sensitive to the impact they are generating. Next slide, please. In communication campaigns, we have been measuring and analyzing the series of posts in social media about sustainability and their understanding of this year. We ran a social media communication campaign in one of our stores. We realized that it is also necessary to raise awareness here, understand why a sustainable product is addressing what problem. In this, the CEM or the paid one, Facebook and YouTube. Our industry shows us that the customers prefer static messages, for example, photos or infographics without movement, rather than videos or reels. Images closer to them, like a house, rather than a. We also saw that they perfectly understand the word caption as a sustainable attribute rather than not impact or green or ecological. So just to see how to scale the success of communicating the attributes sustainable, to me that the whole communication effort must go hand in hand with a strong communication task for customers as well, since the terms and the characteristics of demand must be synchronized. Looking for a simple and easy will also facilitate the reception of the message. Thank you so much.
Wonderful. Fantastic. Thank you so much. I really want to extend our thanks to all of the panelists who've joined us from around the world today here at the United Nations Environmental Programme, around the world, all of you who've lent your experience. I hope everybody realizes we haven't just had a global conversation, we've had a conversation which brings in a whole range of different stakeholders, actors, perspectives. I think we've opened up more questions for the rest of the week, ranging from not only the core question, how do you turn intent into action, but what really are the channels? What are the methodologies? What are the ways in which policy can be effective and can be joined up? What are the frameworks for business? How can you be a pioneer in business? Does that, how do you make sure that you stay with your consumers, or your consumers stay with you? And I really want to send appreciation for all of you who spent time lending your voice to this conversation. Thanks also to all who joined as participants. Excellent comments and questions, which we will endeavour to follow up with. And I hope you will join us for the rest of the week as we dig into specific conversations about everything ranging from e-commerce to biodiversity, to food, to eco-labelling, with fantastic experts drawn from our network. Thanks to the organisers for putting together such a rich conversation, and we look forward to being in touch very soon. Let's make sure that we move in lockstep and arm in arm together towards a world which is safe, fair and sustainable for every consumer, wherever you are. Thank you.